After 4 races, Lewis Hamilton has just 28 points and currently sits just 7th in the championship. Mercedes themselves have had a horrible start to the season, sitting 3rd in the Constructors' Championship, but after Imola they find themselves closer to McLaren in 4th than they are to Red Bull in 2nd. It's been a disappointing start to the season to say the least, but I must be honest, it's also been a very interesting storyline for 2022 because we've seen Lewis have the equipment to fight for wins and titles for many years now, and because of that, seeing Lewis have a car that genuinely right now is over 1 second slower than the Ferrari and Red Bull, it's an interesting occasion and it adds a different dynamic to the season. I mean, as some of you might know, I am a fan of Fernando Alonso, and when it comes to his worst cars in Formula 1, it's almost a case of put your hand in a hat and pick a car, any car. But with Lewis, it really is interesting to see him have potentially the worst car in his career, and also how both him and the team will perform and develop throughout the season. Now, as far as the limitations of the W13, I'm not going to go into massive detail of what's gone wrong because I think we're all pretty familiar, but in short, the car is experiencing massive porpoising, which is stopping it from utilizing the downforce that Mercedes thought they had in the wind tunnel. To counteract this, they are having to raise the ride height of the car, which, although it does help limit some of the bouncing, it also throws away a huge amount of downforce because the car wasn't designed to be run in this compromised state. Currently, Mercedes are trying to find not only the right balance from race to race of how high they can raise the car to stop the bouncing, but not raise it so much that they're giving away too much downforce, but they're also trying to find the solution of why their car is bouncing so much at such a critical speed compared to a team like Ferrari, who also have a porpoising issue, but they don't need to run the F175 at such a compromised ride height, and so even with the porpoising in the corners they still have a lot of downforce. This, however, is not the first time that we've seen Lewis have a bad car, and there has been a lot of comparisons that have been made to 2009, which Lewis himself talked about in Imola. There are people that watch and say that I have never had a bad car, and I can assure you I have. The 2009 car was very far off, and was the worst car that I've had. This car currently is not far off that experience, but I think has a lot of potential. As did that car. We fixed it eventually and got back in the fight or in the game, and I have the utmost faith that my team can do that here too. This experience is a lot harder to fix than we could have ever imagined, but as I've said, what doesn't kill us will only make us stronger, and we will find a solution one way or another. It is, however, a very apt comparison to make between the 2022 W13 and the 2009 MP424. Earlier I mentioned that Lewis is currently 7th in the championship on 28 points. Well, in 2009, after 4 races, he was also 7th in the championship, and adjusting his points using the modern point system, he would have been on 26 points. But let's go back and take a look at just how bad that 09 McLaren was, and why Lewis is drawing those comparisons to that season and that car. First and foremost, McLaren were one of the many teams to miss out on the double diffuser, as only Brawn, Williams and Toyota started the season with that innovation. But that's a very simple explanation, and in reality, there's a lot more to it than that. McLaren and Ferrari had spent the last 2 seasons fighting it out for the title, with it going down to the very last race in both of those seasons. And in the case of 2008, it even went down to basically the very last corner of the last lap of the race. This compromised the teams for 2009 because they didn't put as much time into developing for the new regulations because they were so committed to winning the title the year before. In fact, McLaren even brought upgrades to the car all the way up to the very last race in Brazil, which showed just how hard they were pushing. This meant that McLaren and Ferrari went into the radical new rules in 2009 on the back foot. And that's why development-wise there's a lot more going on than just saying that they missed out on the double diffuser. McLaren designed their 2009 car with an in-wash front wing concept compared to an out-wash front wing concept, which is what was needed for that philosophy of cars. In terms of what the difference is between inwash and outwash, it simply refers to the end plate of the front wing and in which direction it's trying to channel the air. If we take a look at pictures of the Brawn and McLaren side by side from the very first race of the season, the Brawn has a very obvious and very aggressive outwash design with two different elements curving outwards. If we take a look at the McLaren, it's a lot more different, and in fact the end plate almost looks dead straight, but the end plate does have a very subtle curve inwards facing the tyres. This concept of front wing was completely incompatible with this generation of cars, and the problem with getting your front wing wrong is that it quite literally has a negative effect on the rest of the car, because it compromises the airflow that is channeled and therefore compromises the amount of downforce that is generated throughout the entire car. The team did eventually switch mid-season to an outwash front wing concept. This picture from the European Grand Prix at Valencia is a great visual representation at the changes McLaren made to their front wing, and it's also a good comparison of the outwash concepts of both the Brawn and also the Ferrari. This change mid-season came courtesy of a big upgrade package at the German Grand Prix. We often hear about teams bringing big packages or even B-spec cars, but this was the real deal. Not only did McLaren introduce their outwash front wing, but naturally they also developed other areas of the car as well. In Germany, Lewis immediately delivered on the car's potential, qualifying in 5th, just 4 tenths away from pole. In the race, he was unfortunate and unlucky to get a puncture from Mark Webber before even getting into turn 1, but then in the very next race in Hungary, Lewis qualified in 4th, and this time turned it into a race win, giving him and the team their first win and podium of the season, and more than that, confidence, hope, and encouragement that the team did turn it around after such a horrible start. In terms of how bad that launch version of the MP424 was, which raced in 8 out of 17 races, in the dry when all cars are running at their optimum, it was over a second slower than the fastest car, which generally meant that it was a Q2, borderline Q3 midfield car. In 2009, there was a much wider spread across the entire grid, but to give it a very rough modern comparison, it was a little bit better than where Aston Martin are, and kind of where AlphaTauri are right now in 2022. It's always interesting to see what will happen, especially to a young driver with the pressure of being the reigning world champion when faced with a situation where the team don't meet expectations and underdeliver. But to many people, and myself included, there is no doubt that the struggles of 2009 made Lewis a better and more complete driver.
In many respects, I've been more impressed with Lewis this year than in his championship year, because he's really had to grow up and learn how to deal with a car that wasn't the best on the track. I think he's driven the team forward. He's a better driver and a better man for it.
In some ways, I'm glad to eat my words, because they did make huge strides. Possibly, apart from Force India, the biggest turnaround that I've seen in motor racing for some time.
I think we've seen that Lewis is still a potentially winning driver, even in a substandard car.
That was 2009, but now let's fast forward 13 years and to where Lewis is now with the Mercedes W13. Although in 2022 he's starting from a better base because the W13 is better than where the MP424 started, there's actually a much steeper mountain to climb. For one, in 2009, McLaren from testing could see the visual differences to the cars that were faster, and they understood much quicker what the right concept was. The fact that it took them up until the 9th race of the season just tells you how long it takes to research, design, manufacture, and test a brand new aero concept before it can be brought to a race. However, unlike McLaren, yes, Mercedes know the problem, but there's no indication even from them that they actually have a surefire solution that's on the way. The context is also very important. Ferrari and Red Bull are much better organizations now than Brawn and Red Bull were in 2009. Red Bull had only just started to be a top team, and so there was still a bit of inexperience from them, and Brawn literally ran out of money midway through the year and couldn't develop their car in the second half of the season. And something tells me that the Ferrari and Red Bull teams of now are not going to have those issues. And also with respect to Heikki Kovalainen, who was a quality driver, George Russell is in a different league and is already proving to be more than Lewis's equal. All of these factors and the important context means that, again, whilst the base that he's starting from in 2022 is higher, the mountain to climb is a lot steeper. However, this is where Lewis is going to be tested once again in a different situation and with a different kind of challenge to the one that he's been used to, which has been fighting for titles. Whilst I think that the championship is well beyond his reach now, there is still plenty to salvage for him in Mercedes. I still trust that he can win at least a couple of races this season as the car hopefully improves, and like all great champions, he needs to rise to the challenge just like he did in 2009 when the team needs him most. Well, there you have it, another video in the bag. If you did enjoy this one and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe, that would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.